Kombat time!
April 23rd, we're going to be getting a Mortal Kombat movie. But before we see the movie and why some of us might have our doubts on the movie, I thought it would be right for me to talk about a cartoon that came before the movie and see if the cartoon still holds up. This was the second goal of a Mortal Kombat cartoon since the first one was really horrible. We don't talk about the first one. Nobody talks about the first Mortal Kombat cartoon. Defenders of the Realm was sort of a follow-up from the first 1995 Mortal Kombat movie, and it was still trying to take some ideas and characters from the Mortal Kombat 3 game. The show was focused on a group of warriors brought together by raiding to defend Earthrealm from invaders after the end of the Mortal Kombat tournament event. These warriors involved Liu Kang, Kitana, Sonya Blade, Jax, Sub-Zero, Curtis Striker, which nobody wanted in the show, and Nightwolf. Liu Kang, who was champion of Earthrealm and was kind of like the main character of the show. Kitana, Princess of Outrealm, and Liu Kang's love interest. Sonya and Jax are special force agents. Sub-Zero was the outsider of the team who had to constantly prove himself. Curtis Striker was the guy that nobody wanted in the show, including I myself. We all wanted Johnny Cage, but unfortunately we got Curtis Striker. And Nightwolf was the peaceful shaman, but he was the tech guy of the show, who had a pet named Kiva. The show went out with all the villains that they could get their hands on. There were some of the villains in the show that were really bland and forgettable, and then there were some villains in the show that were really interesting to watch. Some of the villains that were interesting to watch in this show are villains like Oniro and Quan Chi and Shang Tsung.
You are mine. So the next time he shows up, Kano is going to have a special surprise for him.
There were some really interesting allies in this show, like Cabal, Smoke, and Asgard. And my question is, why is it that we don't see Asgard in the games? He was first introduced into this show and we don't see him anymore. We don't see him in the games. Why? The character is so cool. Quan Chi was first introduced into this show and he has become a permanent character in the games. So why didn't they introduce Asgard and Oniro in the games as well? Anyway, I don't know. It's clear that this show wanted to be on its own and also wanted to be taken very seriously. So this show was trying to change some characters from the games and was also trying to maybe introduce some new characters in the show. I already talked about them, how they introduced Quan Chi. But some characters in the games were changed for the show. Characters like Reptile, Baraka, and Jade. Instead of Reptile, we got Komodai. Instead of Baraka, we got Cobra. And instead of Jade, we got Ruby. Which I am kind of disappointed because I personally wanted it to be Jade in this show. But they wanted to be their own thing and they wanted to be independent. So they tried to change some things from the games and from the source material and make it their own show. This show was also trying so hard to be like X-Men the animated series, but there were some similarities from this show with X-Men the animated series, like the dragon jets that they were riding instead of X-jets from X-Men the animated series, Raiden sending the warriors on missions like Charles Xavier sends the X-Men on missions, and Sub-Zero always trying to prove himself in the show, like Gambit was trying to prove himself in X-Men the animated series.
What do we know about him?
Only a little more than we know about you. You've never been straight with us. Not completely.
Do I have to draw you a map too? Sub-Zero betrayed us!
Some of the flaws from this show was replacing Johnny Cage with Stryker and not even mentioning him at all in any episode. And also that they also didn't mention Kung Lao in any episode. Even though they talked about the first Mortal Kombat tournament, these characters were pretty much non-existent. Villains like Shao Kahn and Scorpion were also heavily underutilized in this show. They were pretty much weak in this show, and it looked like as if they didn't really need to bring them in this show to bury them. In the game, Shao Kahn and Scorpion are the most ruthless characters in the games. But in this show, they made them pretty weak. Some of the weak episodes of the show are Sting of the Scorpion, Overthrown, and Acid Tongue. Those episodes were just weak and pretty much forgettable. But they did have some great episodes like the story of Sub-Zero and Smoke, and the other episode with Kabal was really interesting to watch. They were some of the best episodes of the show. The art style and animation of this show was great in my opinion, especially for the last episode, which gave more of an anime style so that the fight scenes could look really engaging. And the fight scenes in this show were really engaging. They weren't bad, but for the last episode, it was really good. Voice cast was also okay. We had Clancy Brown as Raiden, Olivia Dabo as Sonya Blade, Ron Perlman as Stryker, which was kind of their way to make Stryker cool and not forced to hate him in this show. It didn't work out, but good try for them. Chris Sommer as Kitana, and Luke Perry as Sub-Zero. These are some of the voice casts for the show. I couldn't mention all of them. But nonetheless, this show was really good. I personally like this show. It had potential to be an outstanding show, but unfortunately it wasn't renewed for season 2. I personally think that if they had renewed this show for season 2, we probably might have seen characters like Johnny Cage, Kung Lao, and maybe even Sindel in season 2 of Defenders of the Ring. But unfortunately, we never really got another season, and the show got cancelled in the end. I'm going to give this show a 7 out of 10, and I highly recommend anyone who wants to watch Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm to give it a try. It's pretty fun to watch. If you have seen the show, let me know down in the comments what you thought of the show. Did you think it was great, or did you think it was good, or did you think it had potential to be outstanding like me and then it got cancelled in the end? Anyway, I'll be leaving for now. Bye.